Masechet Yevamot, Daf Sadi Vav. We begin with a Mishnah that we already anticipated back on Daf Nun Dalid. Interesting case. It says, Amru lo meta ishtecha. Man was married to one woman, and they came to and said, listen, your wife has died. It's going to turn out to all be a false rumor, but he relies on this based on whatever witnesses. V'nasa achota me'aviha, and then he marries this woman's, his former wife's paternal sister. And then they say she died too, meta. V'nasa achota me'ima, and he marries his second wife's maternal sister. And then he gets a rumor that she dies as well. This guy's very unlucky, meta. V'nasa achota me'aviha, and then he marries that wife's paternal sister. Meta v'nasa achota me'ima, and then he hears that she dies also, and goes ahead and marries that woman's maternal sister. That's the end of the line. V'nimsu kulan kayamot, but in the end, all of them return from wherever they were. It turns out they were all alive. And so what will be the consequence? The answer is mutar barishona bashilishitu bachamishitu fotorot sarotehen. He is permitted to remain living with, married to the odd ones, the first, third, and fifth. But not the second and fourth. So the first, third, and fifth are all co-wives. And if this guy should die without children, which is hard to believe after having so many wives, but if it happens, then the Yavam, the brother, can do Yibum, Chalitza with any one of them, the 1, 3, and 5. And since they are all valid co-wives, the others will be exempt. Here is a little diagram that shows how this case could come about. Here you have the 5 sisters. How could they be all half sisters? Well, if you had a guy, a man married a woman, had a daughter. They got divorced, and this woman went and married another man. None of these people are related up here. And they had a daughter, that's number 2. And then they got divorced, and this man married another woman, and they got divorced, this woman married another man, and then they got divorced, and he married another woman. And every marriage there was a daughter born. So therefore, this first wife, the first woman and the second are maternal sisters. The second and third are paternal sisters. These are maternal, and the last one are and last 2 are paternal sisters. So when the guy marries the first one, here's the logic of the verdict. So this is a good marriage, that's fine. Now he thinks that she's dead and he marries the sister. In fact, she's alive. Therefore, this marriage does not take effect. This is erva. One cannot be married to 2 sisters at the same time. The marriage does not even work. So he never was really actually married to woman number 2. When he hears that she dies, he goes and takes woman number 3. Well, that's totally fine because number 1 and number 3 are not related, and the fact that he had he was slept with, because there was no marriage here. The fact that he was with this number 2 does not make him invalid to marry the sister, as we saw in the previous Mishnah. So now he's validly married to the first and the third. When he hears that she dies, he goes and marries the next sister. And that's an invalid marriage because she is alive, and these are sisters. This one's invalid. But because this one is invalid, when he hears that this one dies also and marries the next one, so the next marriage is valid. So the first, third, and fifth are valid because none of them are related to each other. Whereas the in-between links, 2 and 4, are invalid because the ones right before them were valid marriages, and therefore the sisters cannot be married to them. All right, so that explains that. The next clause of the Mishnah lists a slightly different case. In the first case, it says, continues and says, "Vasur b'shniya b'revi'it, ve'en bi'at achat mehen poteret sarataha." He is prohibited from going back and remaining together with the second and fourth, because he is not married to them, and he is married to their sisters, so they are prohibited to him. And if he should die without children, there is no concept of a yibum for them because he was never married to them. So there's no point in doing yibum. The Mishnah's language is that yibum to one does not exempt the other, which of course it wouldn't, because if a brother did yibum, it wouldn't actually be yibum. It would just be he's having bi'ah with one of them, and so have no effect on the other. Neither of them are actually even related to the deceased. Okay, that's all case number one. Now, a variant. Let's say the first wife really died. Not only there was a rumor, but the rumor was true. And then he went with the second. He married the second woman. And so on, and all the rest are the same. And it turns out only one was actually dead. All the rest of the four were come back alive. Then mutar b'sheniya barbi'it ufotrat tzarotehen v'asur b'shilishit v'chamishit v'enviat achat mehen poteret tzarata. Then he's permitted to the second and fourth. And if he dies without children, then a bi'ah yibum with the second will exempt the fourth, and vice versa. However, he's prohibited to the third and fifth. The first one's dead. And if someone does yibum with the third or fifth, there is no yibum because they were never married to him, and therefore you would not need yibum, and it would not exempt the rival wife because they're not really rival wives. So in the diagram, he's married to the first woman, but she really dies. Since she is actually dead, when he marries the second, this is a valid marriage. So good. Now he's validly married to the second. When he thinks that the second one's dead and marries the third one is not a valid marriage. When he thinks the third one's dead and marries the fourth one is a valid marriage because the fourth is not related to the second. So there's nothing wrong with this marriage. But when he thinks that she's dead and marries the fifth, this is not a valid marriage. So it turns out he's married to the second and fourth. Okay, this looks like exact same case. Why is it repeating it? If you look back on 54, daf 54, you see that we're going to learn from here that there's a prohibition not only against maternal sisters, but also half-sisters, but also paternal half-sisters. And so by shifting everything one over, we can see that the prohibition applies the same, whichever half-sister it is. All right, that's the second case of the Mishnah. Now, next case of the Mishnah is talking about a minor. Can a minor boy perform yibum? Ben tesha shanim v'yom echad hu posel al yedei achin v'achin poslin al yado. And the answer is that if a boy is 9 years old and 1 day, so in that case he's mature enough that his bi'ah is considered a legal act. It is a bi'ah. Although he would not be liable, for example, if he had bi'ah with someone prohibited to him, so that would be considered an act of bi'ah, and let's say it was an adult. The adult would be, killed if it was incest or something, and he would be exempt. So that's the point. He doesn't have enough da'at to actually be liable to anything, but he is adult enough that his bi'ah is considered a legal act. In this case, his bi'ah is considered a partial yibum. The problem is he doesn't have enough da'at, he's not mature enough intellectually to fully acquire and be married to the Yevamah. So it's only a partial yibum. So if let's say someone dies without children, and he has several brothers, and one of them is 10 years old. And the 10-year-old, if he goes ahead and does the bi'ah, then that will prohibit any of the older brothers from doing yibum after that. That's it. It's sufficient of a yibum that the other brothers cannot step in. And the same other way around, the brothers, if one of them does yibum, or we're going to see other acts of like ma'amad, chalitza, get, if they do any other acts, then they prohibit the 10-year-old from doing having bi'ah with her. So it's reciprocal. But there is a difference. The difference is that the 10-year-old, he only disqualifies the older brothers if he acts first. His bi'ah at the beginning, then the older brothers cannot do the bi'ah anymore. Whereas the older brothers, their act will disqualify the younger whether they do it first or second. If they do it first, then for sure, let's say they did bi'ah, that's a full yibum. The younger brother is all the other brothers are out. For sure, the younger brother is out. But even if they act after the younger one does, how so? Kesad ben tesha shanim v'yom echad sheba al yevimto. This 10-year-old does bi'ah with the yibum, so now the older brothers are prohibited from bi'ah. Okay, fine. Now, ba'u alehachin, what if one of the older brothers anyway nevertheless transgresses and has bi'ah with her, or vasu ma'amad, or do ma'amad, which is not a prohibition, or v'natnu get, or chalsu, they give her a get, or they do chalitza with her, any of those 4 acts, poslin al yada, they will make the younger brother prohibited from continuing to remain with the Yevamah. The point is that although the 10-year-old did bi'ah, because it's not a full yibum, it's only partial, so then any act, subsequent act by one of the older brothers will take the full effect and will knock out the 10-year-old brother. That is the Mishnah. Okay, Gemara is going to have only a little discussion on the first case because it was discussed extensively back on Nun Dalid, and we ask Atukuluhu lav lachar mitat rishonaninhu. So what do you mean in the second case that the first wife is dead, and then he marries the second? Aren't all the cases after he hears a rumor that the previous wife is dead? No, the second case of the Mishnah is after the definite death of the first one, right? Not just a rumor, but turns out that she is in fact dead, or she's in front of us, and everyone sees that she has died. There's no question about that. That's what I'm talking about the second case, not just a rumor. Okay, this is simply clarifying the difference between case 1 and case 2 in the Mishnah. Now, case 3, ben tesha shani v'chole, ben tesha shani v'yom echad, techila pasel, basof la pasel. The Mishnah said that a 10-year-old, I'm just saying 9 and between 9 and a day and 13. So it's a 10-year-old. The Mishnah said that he will disqualify the brothers if he acts first, but not if one of the brothers, not if he acts after the brothers. One of the brothers does yibum, for example, then the 10-year-old forget it. Does nothing. So now, is that true? V'hatane Rav Zavid bar Rav Oshaya ha'oseh ma'amar bivimto v'achar kach ba achiv shu ben tesha shנים v'yom echad aleha pesala. We have a baraita here taught by Rav Zavid, the son of Rav Oshaya, that says if an older brother does ma'amar, that's a type of kiddushin, and it's a partial yibum. It's like a kiddushin for yibum, but not 100%. And then the 10-year-old brother comes and does bi'ah. Then that will disqualify her for the older brother who did ma'amad. So you see, the 10-year-old is acting second, and even though he's basof, he still is posel. So this goes against our Mishnah. How can we reconcile our Mishnah with this baraita? And the answer is Amre bi'ah pasel afilu basof. What the baraita is true. That's, yes, absolutely. Bi'ah of the younger brother will disqualify the older brothers if it's done second. But that's only bi'ah. When the Mishnah was talking about other acts. Ma'amar techila pasel basof la pasel. If a younger brother does ma'amar, then if he does it first, then the older brothers cannot go ahead and have bi'ah with her. But if he does it after the older brothers do an act, then his ma'amad is nothing. Okay, fine. Ubi'ah afilu basof pasil. Now we're going to ask the opposite direction. Now we're assuming that bi'ah at the end does disqualify. Hold on, but that goes against, it's good, it fits with the baraita, but it goes against the language of the Mishnah. Ela hakatane, ela shu posel techila vehen techila vasof. The Mishnah said that the minor can disqualify only in the beginning, and only the adult brothers can disqualify beginning and end. So, and we give an example, ben tesha shnev yom echad sheba al yivimto, and it was an example of bi'ah. So this is not reconcilable with the language of our Mishnah. So we answer by adding some words. Chasurim mechasera v'hachikatane. This is what our Mishnah means to say. Ben tesha shnev yom echad hu poset techila v'hen postin techila vasof. The 10-year-old, he disqualifies only if he acts first, but the brothers, first or last, they disqualify the younger brother. All that is true only when regarding ma'amar, that the younger brother, his ma'amar at the beginning disqualifies his brothers, but if he acts after his brothers, then the ma'amar is meaningless. That's true. Aval bi'ah poselat afilu basof. But regarding bi'ah, that the younger brother's bi'ah does disqualify the older brothers, both in the beginning and afterwards. And here, Kesad, ben teshashim yom echad shebal yivimto pasal al yidei achin, a 9-year-old who's with his yavam, he will disqualify the brothers, and that would be if he acted first, and even after he acted after the older brother, let's say, did ma'amar. Okay, so that way we reconciled everything. But still we wonder, can a minor do ma'amar at all, that you even bring this as an example? Braita says that a 10-year-old can only disqualify in one way, whereas the adult brothers can disqualify the younger brother in 4 ways. What are the ways? He disqualifies his brothers only through bi'ah. In other words, the minor, only his bi'ah has any legal significance. His ma'amar, we don't care about. It means nothing. Whereas whereas the adult brothers, if they do any of these 4 things, they disqualify the younger brother and each other. Posina with bi'ah, and they could do ma'amar, get, and do chalitza. So we see here is that a minor cannot do ma'amar at all. So this challenges even our reconstructed Mishnah, which says that a minor can do ma'amar and will disqualify the brothers if he does the ma'amar first. So we answer, bi'ah de pasla ben betechila ben basof pesika le. Those baraita, it only included bi'ah because bi'ah by the minor can disqualify the adults, both whether it does it first or after the others act. So that's why I said this is one way. Ba'amad betechila pasil basof la pasil la pesika le. In fact, the younger brother can do ma'amad, but it didn't include it in the list because his ma'amad only is effective in disqualifying the older brothers when he does it first, but not at the end. So that's why this baraita just didn't include it at all, and so that explains the various cases in the Mishnah regarding a minor. Now, continuing a couple more points regarding the power of a minor. Itmar nameh amar Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel yesh lo get, a 10-year-old who gives a get to a yevamah. It is considered a get, like an adult. It does not fully discharge the zikah, but it's valid in the sense that then they cannot do yibum afterwards. And similarly, Rav Techiva says that a 10-year-old can do ma'amar, and that is a partial acquisition of the Yevamah. And a Baraita supports both of these ideas and says a minor can both give a get and do ma'amar with a Yevamah, and both of them will be effective. Now we ask, does Rabbi Meir really think that? Rabbi Meir yesh lo get, v'atanya asu bi'at ben tesha k'ma'amar begadol. Rabbi Meir omer asu chalitzat ben tesha keget begadol. The problem is that the following Braita, look how it uses the word get. The Braita says that the rabbis declared that bi'ah of a minor will be equivalent to a ma'amad of an adult. They both serve as a partial yibum, although not full. Ma'amar begadol is like it's a Rabbanan kind of kiddushin, and so too the bi'ah, the full act of the 10-year-old is does not make a full yibum. Fine. Rabbi Meir says that also regarding chalitza of a 10-year-old is equivalent to an adult giving a get. If an adult did chalitza, that would be fully severing the zikah. But the get begadol is the wrong paper, wrong document. But it does serve enough that he cannot do yibum afterwards, and so too chalitza of a 10-year-old serves as a partial breaking of the bond. Okay, so that's the braita. Here's the question. If a minor can in fact give a get himself, why not say that the chalitza of a 10-year-old is like the get of a 10-year-old, like his own get? Both of them are partial breaks. So it doesn't look like, according to this, Rabbi Meir could say that a child can give a get, because if a 10-year-old could give a get, then why not say like his get? Why say the get of an adult? Answer: Amar Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua itle vezutar. Although the minor can give a get, the minor's get is less powerful than the adult's get. Neither of them are very powerful. Neither of them totally break it because it's the wrong document, but the minor's is even less. So the point is that the minor's get is very low. The minor who does chalitza, that's a next step up, equivalent to an adult get. So it's, if the first one is 25%, this one at least does a 50% breakage. Okay, so now that we have this concept of a get of a minor is weaker than a get given by an adult, Rabban Gamliel damar en get achar get, hanemil begadol achar gadol, vekatan achar katan. Rabban Gamliel, we saw this machloket that Rabban Gamliel says a second get is not effective. If brother A gives a get to the Yevamah, and then, so that will be effective, the first one, and he can't do Yibum after that. And then, if the second one, however, also gives a get, the second one is not effective at all, has zero effect, because you can't apply a get upon yet another get. Good. So that would be true for Gadol, the first and second are both adults, or the first and second are both minors, because they're in the same level. You can't do the same level item twice. Aval Gadol achar katan mehane, but if an adult gives a get after the minor gives a get, since the adult one is more powerful, it will take effect. And also we can see a distinction between the adult and minor get for Rabbanan. They say that you can have a get after a get if they're the same level. Two brothers that are adults, one gives a get, the second one gives a get, both of them take effect, and you have to deal with both. Or both of them are minors also. Will take effect both on the weak level. But if the minor gives a get after the adult is more powerful. Therefore, the minors will not have an effect, and can be ignored. And that is the end of discussion of that Mishnah. All right, next Mishnah is more laws about 10-year-olds. Ben tesha shanim v'yom echad sheba al yevimto, a minor who has bi'ah with the Yevamah. So performs a partial yibum. He has a brother who's also 10 or 11 or 12, and he does bi'ah. He has bi'ah with the same woman. Posel al yado, so the second will prohibit the first one, because the first one was not a full ma'amad. If it was, let's say, two adult brothers, the first one does full yibum, he's fully married. So if a second brother goes with her, that's prohibited. But it will not, they can stay, the first one can stay married. But here, because each one is partial and maybe a different part of that partial, so the second one may acquire her in some way more than the first, and therefore disqualifies the first from remaining with her, from completing the boom or remaining married even afterwards, as a minor or as an adult. Rabbi Shimon lo poseh omer lo poseh. Rabbi Shimon disagrees and says, no, it's fine. The first one did it, and the second one we can ignore, as if they were two adults. And the Gemara will explain why. Ben tesha shanim v'yom echad sheba al yivimto, ve'achar kach ba al saratah, posel al yedei atzmo. Here, there's just one brother, and there are two Yevamot. They are co-wives of the deceased. And so this minor has bi'ah with one, so that's a partial yibum with the first. And then it comes upon the co-wife, also has bi'ah with her. He prohibits himself, because that's the law. You cannot do yibum with two. You can only build up your brother's house once. And since this is only a partial yibum with the first, if it was an adult and he did yibum with one of the wives, he's prohibited from being with the co-wife. But if he does, he can remain with the first one, because that is a full act. In this case, because the first bi'ah is only partial, the second bi'ah may take effect itself, and not to completely overlap the first. Since the second bi'ah is also partially effective, so that prohibits the first one, because if the second one, to the extent that it is effective, that means the first one, you say you cannot perform yibum twice with more than one person, more than one of the co-wives, and so each of his acts prohibits the other, and so he cannot be with either of these co-wives. That's Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon Omer lo posel. Rabbi Shimon says, no, the second one does not disqualify. The second act does not disqualify this one minor from being with the first of the co-wives, and the Gemara now will explain why. Tanya amar lahem Rabbi Shimon lachachamim im bi'ah rishona bi'ah sheniya ena bi'ah im bi'ah rishona ena bi'ah sheniya name ena bi'ah. Rabbi Shimon's thinking is that, unlike Tanakama says that the bi'ah of a minor is a partial. It does 60% of the way of what an adult would do. So therefore, it explains that Tanakama. But Rabbi Shimon says, no, it's all or nothing. We're just not sure what it is. And so therefore, if the first bi'ah is a bi'ah, then that is full. That's it. The first one completes the full yibum. Even though it's a minor, it doesn't matter. A minor, and there's a 50% chance that a minor can do a full yibum, and therefore when the second brother comes and does bi'ah, that's meaningless. Or when the same minor has bi'ah with a second co-wife, that does not affect any bond. And so the first Yavam, the first bi'ah takes full effect, and the second one doesn't, and can remain with the first one. And on the other hand, if you say the bi'ah of a minor is nothing, is not considered a legal act, then the second one is also not a legal act. If you say you have to be an adult to have any valid bi'ah, then both of them are invalid, and therefore he will not become invalidated by any of his acts. And then when he grows up, if nothing happened in between, then he can do bi'ah with either one he wants, or either brother can do bi'ah with this one Yevamah. That's Rabbi Shimon's thinking. Okay, now note, matnitin de lo ke ben Azai, de Tanya ben Azai omer, yesh ma'amar achar ma'amar b'shnei Yevamin v'Yevamah achat, ve'en ma'amar achar ma'amar b'shnei Yevamot v'Yevam echad. We are comparing the bi'ah of a minor like the ma'amad of an adult. We saw that braita above that made that comparison. And so here, according to Tanakama, we do say that the second bi'ah, either by a second brother or by himself, does take effect and prohibits the other. And so we see that this Mishnah applies that principle both ways, in both cases, whether it's one boy with two of the Yevamot, or that's second case, or two boys or both minors with one Yevamah. In both cases, the second act does take effect above and beyond the first act. So this will not be like Ben Azai, because in the comparable case of a ma'amad for an adult, Ben Azai said there is ma'amad after ma'amad in the case of two brothers and one Yevamah, because each brother, we say, each has his own power of zikah and performing of yibum. So if one brother does ma'amad and the second brother does ma'amad, both take effect upon this one woman, and for her to go free, she would have to get a get from the one, a get from the other, take care of everything. But Ben Azai says, "En ma'amad achad ma'amad b'shtei Yevamot v'Yevam echad." If there's only one man and two co-wives, once he does ma'amad with one, he spent his bullet. That's it. He used up his power, and he does not have any power for the ma'amad that he does with the other co-wife has no effect. And so this Mishnah would not agree with Ben Azai, because according to this Mishnah, even in the case of one boy who does the bi'ah be with two of the co-wives, we say that the second one is effective in the sense that it disqualifies himself. All right, and now the last Mishnah of the Perek. This Mishnah has three cases. The first involves three brothers, as follows: Ben tesha shanim v'yom echad sheba al Yevamot. So you have a brother Reuven. We can actually use this chart here, who dies without children, leaving a Yevamah Sarah. And then Shimon is a minor. He's 10 years old, and he has bi'ah and does a yibum, but it is a partial yibum with Sarah, so they're not fully married. That's the case. And he dies as well, leading to the third brother, let's say Levi. Levi must perform chalitza and not yibum. The reason is, back to this chart, erase Miriam for now. She's going to come in a later case. The reason is as follows. Sarah, who is her zikah to? Well, on one level, it's still to Reuven because Shimon's bi'ah was not a full yibum. So Sarah still has some zikah because of Reuven. And also, since Shimon did do some form of bi'ah, so they are partially married, and so therefore her zikah is also due to Shimon. In other words, she has to uphold the name of the deceased, both of Reuven and of Shimon, each one partially. And therefore, Levi has a problem with Sarah because we have a rule that you can only do yibum for one household and not for both, and therefore he cannot do chalitza yibum with either, and he must perform chalitza. All right, that's an important rule. Now, nasa isha vamet harezo petura. If a minor does, forget yibum, he does full marriage. He does marriage with an adult, with a woman. That marriage is not full marriage because he doesn't yet have the capability to fully acquire. When he dies without children, then the widow, she can go free. She's exempt from yibum or chalitza because we're going to see, right? That's the general rule. A minor does not obligate his wife to yibum and chalitza. Okay, now third case is a more complicated variation of the first. Ben tesha shanim v'yom echad sheba al Yevamot. Same as the first. He has bi'ah with his Yevamah. And when he got older, then he fully married another woman. Vamet, and then he died without children. If he did never again had bi'ah with the first wife after he became an adult. If he did after he became an adult, then that would fully concretize that yibum, and he would be fully married to two women. In which case, when he dies without children, that's just like the same as having two co-wives, and the surviving brother would do yibum or chalitza with either one, and the other one would be exempt. But if he didn't, then that first wife was never fully his wife, and so you have the problems that occurred in the first example occur here too. So the first one have to do chalitza like in the first case, but the second one is his full wife, so you can do chalitza or yibum without a problem. So this is just an application of the same principles that we've seen before. Again, Reuven dies without children. Shimon, it was a minor, does bi'ah with Sarah, and that is only half an acquisition. He has a full marriage with Miriam. Forget the colors here. And he has a full marriage with Miriam. So now Levi, he cannot do yibum with Sarah because she is half beholden to Reuven and half beholden to Shimon. So she's out of the picture. But Miriam is a full Yevamah, so that's no problem. We are going to question that thing about Miriam later on in the Gemara. Okay, we brought this case even though it seems like an obvious application because Rabbi Shimon disagrees. Rabbi Shimon omer mi'abem le'ezo sheyirseh v'choles la'sheniya. Rabbi Shimon says he can do yibum on either one and do chalitza on the other one. Why? Because he doesn't say this is that when the minor has bi'ah, it's partial, 50%, but rather he says it's an all or nothing. We're just not sure which one it is. And so if that bi'ah is nothing, then Sarah is still fully has a zikah in order to uphold the name of Reuven. And so Levi therefore can do yibum and uphold the name of Reuven, and that would be fine. In that case, he actually theoretically could even marry Miriam as well and do yibum on both, because both require it. However, there is a possibility that the bi'ah does work, and if it does work, it works fully. In that case, also, he could do Yibum on Sarah, and then Miriam would be exempt, or with Miriam and then Sarah would be exempt, but not both. And so therefore he can choose either one, and either one is fine. But the other one, since it's possible that this did work, and Sarah and Miriam are co-wives, so therefore he cannot do Yibum with one, and he doesn't know which outcome it will be, so he could do with Yibum with either one, and the other one does Halitza, and that's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. And now, last halacha of the Mishnah, Echad shehu ben tesha v'shanim b'yom echad, Echad shehu ben asrim. When we talk about a minor, we know it starts from 9 years old in one day, but it doesn't actually end with 13 years old. Today we just use 13 as an average. But back then, they would say it would be until the person was not only 13, but also grew 2 hairs. If they did not grow 2 hairs, then they would continue being considered a minor until they were 20 years old. All right. Amar Rava. Regarding the first law of the Mishnah, where the rabbis declare that because he has a connection to two Yevamin, deceased brothers-in-law, and he has to uphold the households of 2 different deceased brothers. In all cases like that, when the rabbi said that, you have to do chalitza and not yibum. When the rabbi said that, they said that in other cases as well. What's the reason? La tema hecha deika sara deika lemigzar mishum sara tahacha leka sara michalas chasa yibume lamiyabema. Do not think that it's only because there is a co-wife, but if there were not, because after all here there is no co-wife, and yet one has to do chalitza and not yibum. In other words, in another case that's found back in Daf Lamed Aleph, talks about a case that's the same picture as this, and that's what this really picture is actually for, where this dotted line represents an adult doing ma'amad. And so there, if Reuven dies without children and Shimon, an adult, does ma'amad with Sarah, so ma'amad is a kind of a partial connection, and then he is also married to Miriam, and then he dies. So the law is that Levi is prohibited from taking Sarah. Sarah is on a biblical level, right? Because Ma'amad is only rabbinic. On the biblical level, Sarah is still connected to Reuven. So therefore, on a biblical level, he could, in fact, do Yibum with both Sarah on behalf of Reuven and Miriam on behalf of Shimon. And on a biblical level, the Ma'amad means nothing. And nevertheless, the rabbis say, no, this is a problem. And he cannot do Yibum with Sarah because, on a rabbinic level, she is connected to Shimon. And now what are you going to do? Imagine if he would do Yibum with Sarah and Miriam. So people would say, look, I guess a man is allowed to do Yibum with 2 co-wives. And that would be a very wrong conclusion. And therefore, the rabbis decree, you know what? You have to do Chalitza with Sarah, and you have to do Chalitza with Miriam. That's why this is read here, you have to do it on both. And that's why this red circle. Okay, so that is the law over there. And you might think, by looking at this, that maybe the reason why they say you cannot do Yibum with Sarah is only because Miriam exists, and there you might have that confusion. But let's say Miriam didn't exist. Well, then maybe you'd say he can do Yibum with Sarah, because whatever she is, if she's connected to Reuven, fine, Shimon, fine. It's going to, it's one or the other. And so you might think it's allowed without Miriam there. No, look at this case of our Mishnah. The first case has no other wife, and yet it says it's not allowed, and it's equivalent in many ways otherwise. And so that is Rava's Chidush. Very good. Nasa isha vamet tenena lehu. If a second case of the Mishnah, when a minor fully does marriage with a woman, and he dies, there's no yibum or chalitza for her because he's a minor and never was fully married. And we have a baraita that backs us up. Taned lahad detenu banan shote vekatan shenasu vametu neshotehen peturot min chalitza min yibum. Someone who's mentally incapacitated, or a child, minor, who marry and they die, their wives, if there are more than one, are all exempt from chalitza and yibum. All right, good. Now the third case, Ben Tesha, and so Meshehigdil, and so here he has two. He did the bi'ah with the minor Yevamot and never had bi'ah with her again. So that's always partial. And then he had a full wife when he was an adult, and he dies. Right, and the law is that the surviving brother can do yibum with the regular wife, but must do chalitza with the Yevamot, the previous Yevamot. Okay, now question. V'ya'asu bi'at ben tesha k'ma'amar begadol v'tidache sara mi'ibum. Why don't we say, like we saw before, that the bi'ah of a minor is like ma'amar of an adult? And if it is the same, if so, then the co-wife should be prohibited from doing yibum. In other words, let's continue the comparison between the two cases that we use the same chart for because they look similar. And in the case back on Lamed Aleph, when Shimon is an adult and does ma'amar, the Mishnah declared that Levi cannot do yibum with either wife. Now, if you say that a minor's bi'ah is like an adult's a minor's bi'ah is like an adult's ma'amar, then it should be the same law in our Mishnah. And also you should say here that Shimon, when is as a minor, has bi'ah, and then marries someone else as an adult and dies, it should be the same, that the surviving brother should be prohibited from yibum to both. And yet our Mishnah doesn't say that. Our Mishnah says he can do yibum with this Miriam. So why the discrepancy between the two Mishnayot and the two cases? Good question. Rava lo asu bi'at ben tesha k'ma'amar begadol. Rava said, yeah, you're right. You know what? The rabbis did not make a bi'ah of a minor like a ma'amar of gadol in all ways. It's like it in some ways, but it's not fully like it. So there is in fact a discrepancy. But Shmuel amar asu ve'asu. Yes, they did make it exactly the same. V'chen amar Rabbi Yochanan asu ve'asu. Yes, it's exactly the same. All right. So according to these two, the question remains ve'asu. So then let them be prohibited. Let the Levi be prohibited to Miriam in our Mishnah. And we answer Tana'ehi. In fact, there's a machloket between two schools of Tanaitic thought. Hach Tanad Arba Achin Gazar Mishum Sarah. That case back on 31. Where we're talking about an adult doing ma'amar, that one does make the gezerah because of the co-wife. In other words, what Rava told us above not to think is in fact what this Tana precisely thinks, that the reason why he cannot do yibum with either wife is because people will get confused and said, oh look, he's doing yibum, because on biblical level you could do yibum with both. But if you do that, people will not realize and think that you're allowed to do yibum with two co-wives, and therefore we say you can't do it with either one. And that's what that Tana thinks. And the truth is that would be the same would be true regarding a minor who does bi'ah, our Mishnah. That Tana would say, in our Mishnah also, is prohibited to do yibum with the second wife. And that Mishnah, how come it said talk about gadol? Because it was the context of gadol, so it didn't happen to mention katan. But in fact, it would be a katan. They are equivalent, fully equivalent, not like Rav. And that's one opinion. The Hai Tana, the Hacha, and the Tana of our Mishnah here, Sivira le Asu, Velo Gazar Mishum Sarah. He thinks that's also, yes, they're equivalent, but he does not think that we should make a gezerah that of the optics that it looks like they are two co-wives when in fact they're not. He doesn't think that that's the reason why it's prohibited to take that first wife in Yibum, but rather the reason is because you can't build two houses, and the partial marriage of the partial marriage keeps a connection of that first widow to both the first husband and the second husband, and so then the third one would be building two houses. That's the reason. Nothing to do with the co-wife. And here in our Mishnah, it happened to mention a case of katan, because that's the deal. That's what it's talking about. That's our context. But truth is, it will be the same with the gadol. The Tana of our Mishnah would equate both cases and would agree that in the case back in Daf Lamed Aleph, yes, in fact, the third brother, Levi, can do Yibum with Miriam. All right. Fantastic. And now we get to a little bit of Agadah. Azal Rabbi Elazar Amar Leshma'ata B'midrasha. Rabbi Elazar went and he explained this halacha in the study hall. V'lo madam mishmed Rabbi Yochanan, and he did not cite it in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, his teacher. This is not good. Shama Rabbi Yochanan Ikpad. Rabbi Yochanan became upset that his students stole his Torah, and it's nice for him to teach it, but he has to acknowledge where he got it from. Okay, so this is a problem. Ul legabe Rabbi Ameh v'Rabbi Aseh. Amru le Rabbi Ameh Rabbi Aseh go to visit Rabbi Yochanan to try to calm him down, and they explain to him. לא כך היה מעשה בבית הכנסת של טיבריה, בנגד שיש בראשו גילוס תורה, שנחלקו בו רבי אלעזר ורבי יוסי עד שקראו ספר תורה בחמתן. And they told him, don't you remember that story about that happened in the Bet Knesset in Tiberias regarding this plank that has a knob on it? I'll explain to you what the case is in a second. Anyway, it was a big machloket about that plank between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yosef, and the argument got so heated that they tore a Sefer Torah over it in their anger. In other words, if you're going to get angry, look at the danger of this, right? This is very bad. In that case, two rabbis got angry, they tore a Sefer Torah. It leads to terrible tragedy. So now you're getting angry over this, and maybe you have a right to get angry, but try not to get angry because it's going to lead to really bad things. So that's how they tried to calm him down. This case is this item that has a knob at the end. It's used to lock a door in place. And so therefore you're allowed to install it on Shabbat. The problem is that considered building or not building? Well, it depends on whether this item is in fact like building material or if it's just a general use item. It happens to be because it has this knob at the end, you can use it to like crush things, food, whatever. So it does have a permitted use, and therefore the question is it really a permitted use item, so therefore it's not considered building, or is it a building utensil and therefore it is considered building? Anyway, this was a major machloket. Okay, now interrupting the story, do you mean they really tore a Sefer Torah on purpose? Can it be? No, it means that it was torn by mistake. They were pulling both ways on it to prove their point, and ended up tearing. Vayasham Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma Amar Tameani im lo yeh bet hakneset zo avodah zara v'chen hava. Rabbi Yosef ben Kisma was there and witnessed this, and he said, I would be in wonder if this Bet Knesset did not become a place of idol worship, because you see that it seems these sages are putting their own egos over and above the actual issue. If they were fighting lishma, then it would be mitkayemet, and it wouldn't lead to ruin and destruction. And so you see there's a fundamental problem with the way that they are arguing and how heated they allowed it to become, that they could tear a Sefer Torah. In the end, this will become a place of idolatry, and that's exactly what happened. So the Rabbi Ameh, Rabbi Aseh say, Rabbi Yochanan, don't get too angry, it will lead to terrible things. Hadarik patefet, this did not work, it backfired. Amar chavrutan ameh, you're comparing me to that case where it was two equals, two colleagues that were fighting. I am the teacher of Rabbi Elazar, he's my student, and now you're adding insult to injury by calling him as if he's my colleague. Okay, so that did not work. Remember Bar Idi? He came and said, let me try. And he said, Kasher siva Adonai et Moshe avdo ken siva Moshe et Yoshua v'chen asa Yoshua. Lo hasir davar mikol asher siva Adonai et Moshe. Pasuk in Yoshua says, as Hashem commanded Moshe, so too Moshe commanded Yoshua, and so did Yoshua do. And he did not drop one word from all that Hashem told Moshe. In other words, Yoshua was a reliable student of Moshe and did everything exactly and taught everything exactly as he heard. Vechi al kach al kol davar shamar Yoshua haya omer lehem kach amar li Moshe. Tells Rabbi Yochanan, do you think that every time Yoshua spoke he said, Moshe told me this, Moshe told me that, Moshe told me that? I mean, it would be repetitive. Ela Yoshua Yoshev v'doresh setam. V'kol yodin she'torah shel Moshe hi. Rather, Yoshua would sit and teach, and everybody knows that all of his Torah comes from Moshe. It's so obvious, you don't have to say it. So therefore you should not be insulted. Everyone knows that all of Rabbi Elazar's Torah comes from you, Rabbi Yochanan, and so he doesn't have to say it because it's so obvious. That could be an insult for him to say, I heard this from Rabbi Yochanan, as if there's something else that he doesn't know from Rabbi Yochanan. All of his Torah from Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan comes back with another quip and turns to the other sages. So how come you didn't say nice things like Idi, our friend? Right? So he is comforted by the words of Rabbi Yaakov about Idi, and he used that also as a reason to be angry quip against Rabbi Amir Rabbi Aseh, that they couldn't think of a nice thing like that. Rabbi Yochanan, now we're wondering, we're not asking him directly, but Rabbi Yochanan, why was he so angry? I mean, so what? I mean, it's an obligation of the student to quote his teacher, but why is Rabbi Yochanan so personally upset about this? Tamar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, my dichtiv agura ba'olecha olamim. Pasuk in Tehillim says, I want to dwell forever. Olamim literally means forever. That in biblical Hebrew, olam always means time, all time, all forever. But here, agura ba'olecha olamim means in worlds, two worlds. So what's the plural of worlds? How can someone live in two different worlds at the same time? משום רבי שמעון בן יוחאי, כל תלמיד חכם שאומרים דבר שמועם מפיו בעולם הזה, שפתותיו דובבות בקבר. So David says, I wish that people will quote a halacha in my name in this world, even if after I've passed. And if they do that, I will be able to live in two worlds at the same time. Because after all, Rabbi Yochanan himself said, that's what we're quoting, so it's good, we're quoting Rabbi Yochanan, we're fulfilling this exact thing that he said. It says, any sage that is quoted, his words are quoted in this world, his lips move in the grave. His lips are flutter in the grave, like he's whispering and saying the thing, right? He's echoing. So when we're reading someone's word, explaining someone's words, we are in a way being a ventriloquist, and it's as if they are speaking themselves. So that's how you can live in two worlds. And how do we know what's a proof for this? In Shir HaShirim, where it says your mouth is like the best wine that glides down smoothly, moving gently the lips of those who are asleep. We're taking asleep as meaning dead, and their lips can move. So what's the analogy with the grapes? Kechomer shel anavim, like a pile of grapes that are left to warm and to ferment. Makumar shel anavim kevan shemaniach adam es ba'olav miyad dovev. And just like these grapes that are all ready and bursting, you just put your finger on it and it starts bubbling up. תמיד תלמידי חכמים, כיוון שאומרים דבר שמוע פיהם בעולם הזה, שפתותיהם דובבות בקבר. So to sages, when we quote them here in this world, that figuratively, their lips are moving even in the grave. So the point is that how does a sage achieve afterlife? What's the greatest thing that a sage hopes for? It's not wealth and anything physical, but to be quoted, for someone's words to be quoted, and you're thinking along the same lines as that sage did, and you're having the same brain patterns and questions and answers. So you're kind of you're actually recreating those thought structures, quoting them in their name. That is the greatest honor, and that's how a sage achieves ability to live in both worlds, in this world, even after they are dead. And so that's why Rabbi Yochanan said, look, even in my life, he's not even quoting me, so that's why he was so upset. He's taking away his olam haba. But then when he realized that actually everyone knows that everything that the student says is Rabbi Yochanan's teachings, he felt better. All right, one last halacha so we can finish off the perek. Ehad ben tesha shanim. We said that the stage of being a minor goes from 9 years and 1 day all the way until one grows 2 hairs, even if it's past 13, even up to 20 years old. Question: Urminu ben 20 shana shelo avi shete sarot yavi'u re'aya shu ben 20 vehu hasaris lo choles ve'lo meyabem. Hold on, we have a braita. This is someone who is 20 years old, who does not yet have 2 hairs, so he has to bring proof that he is 20 years old, and that's called a saris, a eunuch, meaning he's developmentally that way, and because of that, he does not do chalitza or yibum, because a eunuch doesn't do chalitza or yibum. But the point is at that point we call him an adult. He is an adult for other matters, for example, being punished. And so we see that the 20-year-old without hairs is considered an adult here, whereas Mishnah says is considered a minor. So which one is it? And the answer, that baraita continues. Bat estim shelo havi shete sa'arot yabiu re'yashi bat estim vehi ailonit lo chozev lo mityabem. The same thing with a woman who is 20 years old and still did not develop 2 hairs, so she brings a proof of her age, and then she is officially an ailonit, and ailonit cannot do chalitza or yibum, but now is considered an adult for other matters. So how do we reconcile this with the Mishnah? Hait marala amarav Shemuel bar Yitzchak amarav vahu shenodu lo simane saris. Now we only call a person a saris if they have some other characteristic that saris has, or in case of women, like a low voice that ailonit has. Only then do you declare them such, but not otherwise. So our Mishnah is talking about when they do not have these other signs. And you know what? We can actually learn this from the baraita. It says this is the saris. So meaning this is someone who is definitely a saris, indicating that they also have other signs. And what if he doesn't have other signs? So what, is he going to be not considered a saris and not considered an adult for his whole life? How long? And the answer is till a majority of his years has passed. Well, how do you know when you're going to die that you would know the majority of the years? Well, we take an average. If an average lifespan is 70 years old, then we're about 35 years old. If they don't have other signs, will not be declared a saris or ailonit until they are 35. All right. If you had a person who was way past 13 and still didn't develop the signs sufficiently, and they would bring him to Rava to check him out, say, is this person an adult yet or not? So Rava would say, listen, if he's skinny, he would tell them, listen, go and make him healthy, fatten him up. And if he was bari, healthy, and meaning fat, in those days, most people didn't get enough calories. So, if he was a little overweight, he would tell him, make him thin. First, and the reason is because these signs of hairs, sometimes hairs fall out because the person was too thin the whole time, or because he was too overweight. And therefore, if he's thin and he has no signs, fatten him up, maybe the signs will come then, or the other way around. And so then you'll know, it could be just a temporary condition because of his health adjustment. And if you make this adjustment, then you'll see that, in fact, he has the signs. So you want to try everything first before he would make a declaration to help the person get to a final decision. And with that, we complete the 10th perek, Hadran Allah Ha'isha Rabbah. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.